Welcome, everybody. This is the July 8th, 2024 Affordable Housing Committee Project Development Subcommittee meeting. That was meant to start at 5:30. We're starting a couple minutes late. We had some technical difficulties entering the building. So in terms of attendance, Kristen Nielsen, I'm here. Hillary Ormond, here. Bill Correct. It's here on Zoom. Are you muted?
He's muted.
Okay. Can you hear us, Bill? Oh.
Sometimes the volume breaks up or breaks out. So if you're asking if I'm here, I'm here.
Okay, you're here. And everyone in the room, if you want, you can probably turn your microphones on at this point. Mike Sweeney.
Here.
Jane Williams.
Here.
And Jeff Williams.
Here.
Also joining us this evening, we have John Goodwin, who's the chair of the Full Affordable Housing Committee, and Maria Weingarten, who is also a member of the Full Committee. Okay, so basically tonight we're just going to pick up where we left off at the last meeting, which was the last meeting. I think everyone was here. We discussed which sites we'd kind of gone through the map and spreadsheet and identified as the ones we wanted to pursue, at least for now, as a first cut, largely parking lots, except for the mulch pile. And so tonight I wanted to pick up and go through that. And then whatever time we have left at the end, I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about what we mean by small ball, so that we can start also making progress on sort of that side of things. Okay, so I'm gonna share my screen. Start broadcast. Okay. All right, so I just kind of used the same presentation we had last time. For those that weren't here, if anybody's watching on Zoom, I'm not going to go over this completely because we went over it in detail last time, but what we're talking about are a variety of different approaches to how we want to handle affordable housing. What we're calling big ball is largely a larger scale development, 1 or 2 sites, concentrated units, something more like what we've done in the past at Millport Apartments or at Canaan Parish. Small ball is sort of the opposite end of the spectrum. It's smaller scattered sites. It could be duplexes, it could be units in multifamily buildings, but it's not necessarily one big building with all or largely affordable units in it. It would be throughout town. And then hybrid approach was something in the middle. So I just wanted to open with that in case anybody's new to this conversation. Okay. This hasn't changed. This is the same slide as last time. We talked about some selection criteria that we'd used to come up with the sites that we are going to talk about in a moment. And this is where we've landed. And so the sites that we talked about last time are the same on this slide. I just included a little map to try and zoom in on them. Most of them are in the downtown core, with the exception of the mulch pile, which is down by Waveney. And so we had 7. I don't think we assigned all 7. I think we assigned 6 out of 7. So we'll have one that we need to follow up on later. But this was what we were going to talk about tonight. So from here on out, what I was thinking is that we'll each, spend however long we need to going through what we learned about our site. And then after we each go through our sites, we can spend some time talking about how we want to pursue with these big ball sites from here on out. So because I'd done it at the last meeting, I continued working on Richmond Hill, which doesn't have an address, I found out, but it is number 35 on our map. Yeah, doesn't have a legal address. And there's a lot of positive things, I think, about this site. Obviously, it's already owned by the town. It currently is used as a surface parking lot with 64 spaces for commuters. I did not get to check on the deed restrictions, which is why that's highlighted there, but I will. Other good things, it's, like I said, close to downtown, walking distance to downtown, across the street from Mead Park, so there would be recreation nearby. It's not in a flood zone, it's not, doesn't have wetlands. It's currently zoned apartment, which means if we did want to do some level of density there, I mean, should have been expected for some time that could ever happen, although it has been owned by the town as a parking lot for a long time. And the other thing that I think is advantageous about this site is that there's a grade change, approximately from what I can tell, looking at the topographic maps, 15 to 20 feet from the northeast corner to the northwest corner. So that could allow us to do, residential at grade with parking kind of down below in the back. I suspect Lumberyard and some of the other sites we talk about may have that same opportunity. And then the town has owned it since 1974. When I looked back at the history of it, I don't think it's ever been built on. I looked at old Sanborn maps, which were used for fire insurance back in the mid 1900s. And it's always been either like a green piece of land or a parking lot. The Knights of Columbus was who the town bought it from. I don't know what their plans were, but it appears they never executed on them and sold it to the town. So I think it's either been greenfield or parking lot since the beginning of time. And then I know I sent to you guys, I don't expect that any of you did it because it was a little difficult to work with.
I tried.
But the software program, and the main thing I just wanted to take away from that to share with you tonight, other than that it was complicated and a little challenging, was that I came up with the potential for 21 to 35 units on that site, which obviously, we will eventually need a consultant and an architect and people who are far more skilled in this than I am on the internet. But I thought that was useful information. That did include below ground parking. The picture you can see that I screenshotted was of the 3-story version. So that was 21 units, largely 2 and 3 bedrooms, which was an option I chose. So I thought, that was just helpful to kind of get an idea of what the potential of these sites are. What I forgot when I was using that software program is that we also would need to replace the 64 commuter spaces that were already there. So there would have to be more parking than what this shows. But as you can see, it was an L-shaped building, which whatever, that's neither here nor there. There's still plenty of room on the site if we wanted to do surface parking or other below ground parking or structured parking. So that's what I have on Richmond Hill. Next up.
Just ask.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, when you say you have to replace the spots, we could have the people who park there instead park at like Railroad.
Correct. So, I mean, I guess the point is we'd have to have a conversation with the town's parking office to see how utilized these spaces are now. I mean, just from a personal anecdote, I know my husband used to park there many years ago before he got the railroad lot and it was full then. It doesn't appear to be full now, nor does the railroad lot. So I suspect we probably don't need all of those spaces back if we chose to build on it.
I think the railroad lot though still does have a waiting list. We just have stalled it since commuting hasn't, it was presented in a town council meeting, so I can go back and check on that, but there is like a substantial wait list at the Lumberyard for parking, so I don't know.
It's been significantly decreased as we talked about it in Board of Finance.
Do you know what the number is? Because last I heard,
I mean, it used to be like,
it used to be 475.
well, it used to be 7 years.
No, I get,
Now it's like 2 years or so, but we're talking about people who already have a spot. So my thought is that, if it's underutilized right now, we can probably, we're just moving people who already have been assigned a spot. It's not like we're not adding new people to a list. These are people who've been already assigned a position.
right.
Okay. Any other questions I guess I should ask? I didn't consider that. We're good. All right. So I'm just going to make a note that I need to check on usage.
And I would check
And
too if
deed
this is
restrictions.
exclusively for commuters, because I do know somebody who has an office downtown who uses that parking lot and walks from there. So that could be that there's some business permits that
Okay.
are there. She works up by Starbucks.
Okay.
So at that end of Elm, I don't know what direction.
Sounds good. Okay, so next I have Hillary with the lumberyard.
Okay, so
Right.
Lumberyard is at 244 Elm. That's the official address. It's owned also by the town of New Canaan. No deed restrictions as far as I could tell. Sewer, water, yes, substantial size lot, 2.91 acres. The zone is business, so we'd have to work on that. Current land use is 298 permit only surface parking spaces. Oh, and also I should have put in there that another usage is the farmer's market. That's my bad. No wetlands that I could find or flood zone. Walk to parks, yes, Irwin would be probably the closest park, but also walkable to Mead Park. Could walk into downtown, probably not walk to school. I assume it's a west school district. So things to note, we bought it in 2001. It hasn't been built upon. We did purchase, well, let me start first. So I did a little digging into the parking situation because it is sort of, even though commuting is down, it is the most popular parking lot. So my thought was we would have to do a 1-to-1. You'd have to accommodate any building that went up there and the current permit holders. So in or around 2003, the town commissioned parking structure designs for the lumberyard that came in at about $12 million, and that was deemed excessive. So imagine in the 21 years since, oh my gosh, it's probably significantly more. And then subsequently in 2018, the town commissioned another study by Desmond, who also did the Locust Avenue study, to add up to 250 spaces, which is a substantial lot. I'm still waiting on that paperwork from Tiger. So he had sent me the Locust Avenue one, but I couldn't find the lumberyard.
Add
Desmond study.
250 to the 298 to make it a
Up to
500.
that, yeah. So that's what they told Desmond to do, which is this
Okay.
engineering firm, to look at it, max an additional 250 spaces. I'm not sure what their conclusion was. It might have been like, no, we can't do more than 50 because of, so I'm waiting on that and I'll circulate it when I get it. But again, presumably we would have to replace that parking, which would be, $9 million maybe if we estimate $30,000 to $40,000 per space in a decked parking, which I think is the figure that's been thrown around. Please correct me if I'm wrong. And if we added, say, 100 more spaces, because this I would think would be a fairly large, substantial project, it would be an additional $3 million, give or take.
Mhm.
So we're in $12 million just for parking, which is a lot. And then what was I going to, oh yeah. Then subsequent to 2018, we also the town purchased 28 Grove, which is another, oh my gosh, I'm so blind.
It's that little pig.
It's that little house on Grove Street. It's
0.15 acre.
0.15 acres. So but that really, I think, was strategic mostly for the entry and exit into the lumberyard lot from Grove Street. So it does provide an additional egress, which I think is good if we're going to try to build something large that we have then. We could do entrance, exit, or whatever. Just looking at old newspaper articles and really just chatting with people around town. This has been floated. It was floated into 2022, which you guys probably know from planning and zoning, to build affordable housing here. And it's met already with sort of substantial pushback. And some of it is that this is seen as a very prime spot in town. So what's the best use of it? Is it, again, like you've said, is it a mixed use building? Is it something where we would partner with a developer and have I mean, I can't imagine could the town even build like a mixed development that has market rate and affordable and landlord that? I mean, I don't know if that's going to happen or if we can build that. So there is a lot of, but on the other hand, it's kind of now, like, it's not the most attractive parking lot. It does have that grade where we could work with the decking. So we're kind of sitting there waiting for this huge opportunity to come because it is such a prime location and not much is happening yet. So
Mhm.
I do think that this would face a lot of public pushback if we
And
were
what was
trying to
the,
develop it.
what was the nature of the pushback at the time? Just because it was such a strategic piece of property, or people
Well-
felt it was inappropriate to have affordable housing in the center of town, or?
I think it was a traffic concern. I think people have a lot of different ideas about it, that we could somehow make a lot of money on it. Maybe if we sold it, maybe there's a trade available. Avalon was gonna go there, right? And then
That's how
we
came
got the
into it, I
swap, and
think.
that's how we bought it, right? So I think that there's this idea of an opportunity that nobody has quite, or maybe I haven't heard it articulated yet.
There was also a huge commuter parking constituency. People believe very strongly that, you know, look, this is a commuting town. This, as you said, this is the trophy property for commuting.
Yeah.
And there was big opposition for that reason.
I think it was also looked at for senior housing, if I recall. There was a discussion about having parking underneath senior housing above that, and maybe on Elm Street, there was going to be some houses facing that, so you couldn't really see the parking that was behind it as well.
There's gonna be retail in that plan too, like the
Mhm.
service that
Mixed
folks
use,
who are
yeah.
living there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there were a couple of different things floated, but I mean, yeah, I know it's your committee, sorry.
No.
But that's what I recall too, that was one of those things that, you know, but to me, there was a really good presentation at the library where they talked about making this more of a larger project. I just, you know, I feel awkward as Affordable Housing Committee trying to run this, run the boat on this one, because it's like, this is a much more, to me, it's a much more of a master plan undertaking than it is just thinking about
Right.
affordable housing for us.
Yeah, and I think there's an opportunity for green space, so we could maintain, you know, the farmer's market there. It would provide green space for the residents. But again, I think you're right. I think that on paper, it's like the most attractive to me because it's a large piece of land. But then, you know, even just the cost of replacing the parking and making sure that that is done well, and then adding spaces for residents, it would be a massive structure. Even if we built, like, even having that grade, which I don't know how to picture that. I tried to find it.
Are there data since the COVID period on parking, commuting? There are. So we have current numbers. Are they vastly
can get
different from 5 years ago?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think what I've been told, and you've probably heard the same thing at Board of Finance or something similar. Actually, I have a finance subcommittee meeting tomorrow night, so I'll ask Ann and Josh. I think Mondays and Fridays are the busiest days on the train and the busiest day. No?
The opposite, Tuesday,
the
Wednesday,
opposite.
Thursday.
Oh, Tuesday, Wednesday. Okay. So one
They
of those
work
two.
from home.
Oh, right,
Monday,
Friday. Yeah. So it's definitely not back to pre-COVID
Right.
levels.
And probably, well, we can't know, but
Yeah.
the
I
other
think
thing.
there's a push to get people back in the office by a lot of companies in New York. So, but who knows?
And the only other thing I was going to say is that viewing any floated idea in a vacuum is probably any one of the ones we're discussing would elicit strong reaction.
Mhm.
If at the end, what we're trying to do is choose between a number of them, knowing that we need to choose one, people's feelings might be more nuanced and different, I think.
Mhm.
Because if you just hear, yeah, they're going to build. Yeah, that's different than, well, we get to choose between. We don't like any of them, but we're going to choose. Or we love all. Anyway, obvious point, but.
No, it's a good point.
There.
It's a very, and look, we're not going to please everybody
No.
when you choose, right? So I tried to do that program. It looked super cool, but I couldn't get the starting thing correct. I don't know. I thought it was my computer.
Yeah, and I don't, again.
But
we'll
I thought that
decide-
was really neat.
If there's value added in it, then I can help
Absolutely.
figure it out before the next meeting, but I mean, I would need an architect to even like look at what it came out with me and be like, oh, that's in the ballpark, or that's just ridiculous. Don't waste your time doing 5 other sites.
Yeah.
But
No, I thought it was cool though, that even it exists. So thank you
Yeah.
for sharing that.
you're welcome. Okay, other questions about this one, or should we move on?
I wonder too, if there, I mean, to think creatively, if we decide that this is a good spot for affordable housing, it's not, we wouldn't necessarily have to use the whole lot either,
Right.
right? Like we could use that rectangle that abuts Grove or
Right.
something, or a square of, it just kind of depends on what we need, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at least here you could preserve some outdoor parking and maybe not have to build a gargantuan parking structure.
Either way, though, I think we're still back to it would require a master plan.
Yeah.
Like choosing
Yeah.
which piece
Sure.
you're gonna use. Sure, you may not build the whole thing, but you want to make sure it all works together.
There's some precedence for that too, because I think the town cut off 220 Elm a few years ago when
the town acquired the building and then the Board of Education went in there.
Mhm.
They used to be part of the whole lumberyard, so I think they drew a property line, and it used to be a lease line, that old Avalon
That was
building.
a lease.
So I think that was cut off, so there's precedent where they cut off a piece to do it for a particular
Oh,
purpose.
interesting, yeah.
Yeah, and then I think the town made that office building into condos.
Yes.
So it's further divided in terms of like, if you wanted to try and put all the pieces together and have this bigger property, it's more complicated with the condos and
Yeah.
the separate property
Yeah, the
line.
town kept one for the Board of Ed and then flipped the other two to a
Right.
private owner.
Right, which makes it hard if we ever wanted to kind of consume that into a larger project. It's probably not coming back.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay,
Thanks.
thanks.
Yeah. Morris Court, this was Jane's.
Yeah, sorry, it's hard to read. Another piece of property without an address. This one has belonged to the town since 1949. And nobody has, as far as any records show, ever tried to make it anything other than what it is. It's zoned residential according to the documents that we have, but it's about to be repainted. And there will be, what is it? I can't see the number because it's
78.
No, it's more that it's 78 is either what it is or what it was proposed to be. It is now going to be 95 approximately.
Oh, I thought we were losing space.
I thought we were
Well,
losing.
I think it was
says
90.
95. This could be really old for all I know. I don't know.
No, this is what they just gave us at planning
Oh, it
commission last
is?
week. So I think it's going down to 78. Maybe it's
Okay,
95
maybe it
now.
is. Okay. Sarah said 95, but it could be that that's what was proposed and this is what came out of the meeting. So it's not quite an acre. And the one thing that I'd really like to know, and I don't know yet, but is knowable, is how much it's used. My sense is it's full all the time.
Yeah.
But the reason this is even on our list, I think, is because Jeff Speck in the same presentation you're referring to, Maria, at the library, the walkability expert identified this as a piece of property that he thinks desperately needs to be changed because it looks as if it's the end of town. And then you cross the street and you're at the library and the green space and so on and so on. And now you can walk down Main, walk down South, but this looks like, okay, oh, I'm at the end of town.
Mhm.
And so his idea, though I don't believe he did any sketches or drawings of it, was to convert this to a combination of retail, residential, and have parking kind of nested inside, and thought it could be lovely and helpful to the town.
Is Morse Court built up? Like, is there, so is that, it's not,
That's my
It's got a
question.
grade, it's got a grade change too. When it up near the
But you know what
mobile
I'm saying? Yeah,
station, it's
yeah.
a grade, but down near near Main Street, it's 4 or 5 feet high.
oh,
Okay.
so it's great. And so there's filler like here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To make
It's like
it
across
flat.
from
Parking
Spiga.
should go underneath. I don't know if there's flooding issues, because the library used to have flooding issues. I don't know what that's like underneath, but that
Yeah,
would
I
seem
can
like
look into
a
that.
good opportunity.
Yeah. What a good opportunity. It just, yeah, it feels very.
Yeah, it's high.
Yeah, of course, there's that wall over on the street.
Yeah, there's
Okay.
one on Maiden.
Have you guys been to the new Norotan development where across from the train station in Norotan Heights, where that is spectacular.
I've seen it from a distance, but
It's, my daughter had baking camp there at the Sur La Table, but it's like a completely transformed area. It's really nicely done. I don't remember how many affordable units they have in there, but it's all retail and then 2 or 3 levels of apartments.
it's above.
Yeah, it's really nice. It's worth going to see.
And do you know if it was the housing authority in Darien? You know?
No, I think it was a private developer, but not David. David did,
Kennedy's?
yeah,
There's a New York group, I think, that.
Yeah. David did the Corbin, which also the Corbin stuff looks
Mhm.
fantastic, but this is really, it's got a Sur La Table, it's got a Sweetgreens, it's got a nice coffee house, like it's a very well done development by Palmer's. Anyway, it reminds me of
Yeah,
Morse
an
Court.
opportunity.
Mhm.
Okay, I have one more here in my email. I think, Bill, this is you, right? This is the mulch pile.
That's correct, the mulch pile. Sorry for the format change. So if you take a look at the entire Waveney, it's 331 acres. 46, I guess, is owned by the Board of Education, and town 285. The mulch pile itself, and I don't know if it's possible to bring up one of the pictures or both of the pictures just for a moment.
Yeah.
So, sorry about that. So the mulch pile is really this big vacant piece of land that you see on the left as you're looking at the screen, correct? And
Yeah.
at the bottom where the gray area is was the proposed location for the police firing range. And then just those bumpy little lines next to it is really where the mulch pile is. And, you know, I said maybe that's about 10 acres because of little wetlands around it. But all of that is at one end of the property, and there's about another 40 acres, which, you know, that's my estimate. Some of which is wetlands, but the degree of wetlands and the last time that was tested, I think remains to be seen. And but even though there's wetlands, there's a fair amount of space that is not wetlands. And you know, my thought, I'm not a builder, but I'm fairly knowledgeable in this area. My thought that you could do a fair amount of building in there. The mulch pile itself, you could leave that there, or you know, longer term, someone could decide if they wanted to do something different. There is water and storage, as you'd well expect, at the Waveney House. So you can sort of see it up in the right-hand corner. It's sort of colored in a little bit there. And so you'd have to connect from the Waveney House into that field. And I'm not suggesting that that's not expensive, and I'm not suggesting that it's easy, but it certainly is doable. And, you know, in the grand scheme of things, you'd have to take a look at it. There is no floodplain problem there per se, but if you go all the way up to the top of the picture on Old Stamford Road, on the far side of Old Stamford Road, there's a stream there which is not visible, but that floods at certain times a year, presumably during heavy rains. And, you know, I don't think this would aggravate that, but maybe this would be an opportunity to fix that at the same time, you know, which should be helpful to the local residents who are very concerned about that. I mean, it's walkable, obviously, to the park, to the fields, to the high school, to some of the grammar schools, even the middle school. It's a long walk to Talmadge Hill, but it's nonetheless walkable. And depending if long-term you put this into mixed use, you could provide a little bit of a shuttle. So, you know, I think when you talk to people, the immediate reaction is, oh, you can't do it. But I would come to the conclusion you could. I would think it would be a multi-use piece of land. It's really not being used very much right now, except for a mulch pile, which is fine, but it's sort of 50 acres in the middle of New Canaan, and it's, you know, not even a football field or a baseball field or a school. So I would think the town would want to explore that. There are deed restrictions, of course, which I indicated on the slide, because this, just in summary terms, this whole thing was dedicated as parkland. But if you go back through the history, when it was dedicated in December of or donated in December of 1964, there's been a number of applications and agreements in 67, 71, 74, 80, 87, where, you know, Christopher Lloyd or the Lapham family has been approached and given permission for certain different things. So I would think the mulch pile itself, that so-called mulch pile lot, you know, could be redesigned with the wetlands to make it not only a dedicated land for wildlife, but also beautiful, but at the same time house some either low-income housing, middle-income housing, or senior housing. So that was what I found on this.
So just so I understand, Bill, are you saying that the deed restrictions, we all kind of went into this knowing there was deed restrictions, but you're saying they've been amended over time?
They have been amended in the past, and of course we'd have to ask, but I guess if, you know, if it was my nickel, you know, I think I would ask, because at some point it's going to get, you know, the ask will always be there, but the decision makers over a period of time, of course, will change. That just normally happens in life. So, why not go and make an ask at this particular point in time? I've lived in town for 40 years, and every time I looked at that, it's a little bit of a open space, but lots of trees and a little bit not used very well, I don't think, for a town of, and I think we as a town could really design that land in a way which accommodated the current needs of the town, but also fulfill the wishes of the Lapham and the Lloyd family.
Okay. Other questions for Bill?
I'm curious, Bill, do you recall with the amendments, what was done to make them less restrictive? Was it a small de minimis thing, or what was done by way of those amendments that lessen the restrictions in some way?
Well, I didn't go back and read through the deeds, but the overview I have talks about in 64 was a donation for school use only, and then again in 66, and then there was I think the Waveney Care Center was in 71. If I'm reading this correctly, there was probably permission sought. And then we agreed to swap parcels with the town, the school, to the athletic fields in 74. In 1980, it looks to me like the purchase of the house on Lapham Road, which I guess was then converted. And then the conveyance of land for the water tower. So, it looks to me we'd have to study it. And I think, there has been some work done in this area. And then there was something done in 95 as well. So, this wouldn't be the first time that the town has had a request, and no reason to believe it would be granted, but no reason to believe it wouldn't be granted. And I think, the mulch field is important to the town and Tiger and so on, but I think that, what I looked at would say to me, there are some things we could do in that particular area. And and it goes all the way down, as you can see from the map, to really the intersection of, I guess, what will be Lapham Road and Old Stamford Road. There's sort of a two-way corner there, or a three-way corner, and there's last time I looked, there was a sort of a sign telling you which way to stay right or stay left. And the town pool is right there as well. So I'm sure there's water and toilets in the town pool as well.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
But we probably wouldn't attach to that. You probably have to go back to the Waveney house.
Okay.
Anyway, that's my report on that. I mean, I think it's I guess this might be it's a feasible project. It's certainly part of the big ball answer, but maybe not the little ball answer. Although you could probably do a little small section at the bottom of it pretty easily. I guess if you did something really small, you couldn't amortize the cost for the water and the sewer extension. So you'd probably have to have a grander project in mind.
Mm.
Bill, that's all on that side of the Merritt, right? It's not coming on the opposite side, because that's, I think, the tricky part is you can't get all the services over to the other side because of the Merritt.
No, it's on where you see proposed location on that map, the gray area. I guess it would be.
Right, yeah, I see it. Yep.
That's the Merritt Parkway.
Got it. Thank you.
And so it's right by that proposed location. There must be a bridge there.
Yeah.
And so, you could, and, a little bit of a shuttle, whatever, back and forth if you wanted to long term, or probably put in a walking trail to the station. I mean, you wouldn't want to walk on a rainy day for sure, but on a sunny day it'd be nice.
Okay. Any other questions on this one or thoughts? I think once we go through them all, then we'll kind of have a conversation about which ones and how to proceed. All right, I'm going to stop sharing the screen.
So what do I do now?
Hold on, let me stop sharing. So are you on the Zoom?
Yep, on the Zoom.
Go to share content. You want to share your screen.
This is my screen. Okay.
And it's going to count down. Okay, maybe just hit start broadcast.
Okay, I need to,
Okay,
okay,
so now you're in, so
and now I
now,
need to get my content. right?
yeah. Just bring up what you want to share.
So I want to take a little bit different approach. I've got all the answers and all that stuff. I have a little bit different format because when I started looking at the Locust Street lot, I found it is an incredibly interesting piece of property. You all know the Locust Street lot as bounded by Locust Street on the south, Forest on the east, and depending on what age you are, Husted or Heritage Hill on the west. Let me just go through some of what I've learned. The parcel was assembled by a fellow by the name of John A. Boss Bucciarelli. And it was the home to many immigrant families, primarily Italian. It was definitely the Italian neighborhood in New Canaan. There were from time to time African Americans and from time to time also Polish. The population hovered around 30 to 40 people, 20 families, and 7 multi-story multifamily buildings. At least one of those buildings had been repurposed to house one of the last remaining shoe factories. This is the, there is a book, a wonderful book, written by one of the occupants of the area about what it was like in the 30s and 40s. And he is the fellow who did this map. It's not terribly accurate, but you can see it's literally the whole area that's occupied by what we call the Locust Avenue lot. This is what it looked like in the neighborhood, kids playing. This was a typical building in the neighborhood. And as I said, there were apparently six buildings that were devoted to housing, and one building, I think I have a picture of it. I'll get to that in a moment. This is looking from Locust towards the property. You can see it was fairly densely populated. This is looking from the corner of Forest and Locust up towards, and the building you see in the far distance is the thrift store. Nobody could tell me, I did a lot of research on this, nobody could tell me what the brick building was. It was an apartment building. The only thing they could tell me was that the top floor was always occupied by African Americans. This is another vista that you can see. It was fairly densely populated. Obviously, the firehouse is on the right and the thrift stores on the left. This is an interesting building. This is when they started demolishing the buildings. And this building had been converted into a shoe factory. So it hadn't been cleared out or anything. It was still, apparently it was still in apartments, but every one of the craftsmen had a little space to work in. In 67, Bucciarelli sought for a consolidation of the parcel zoning from split zoning residential and business, and that application was denied. In 72, 2 New Canaan residents by the names of George W. Haynes and David W. Mitchell purchased the entire property from Bucciarelli with the stated purpose, I love this, what they said they were going to do, of demolishing the existing buildings and developing a shopping mall of 10 to 20 stories. They started, they went to planning and zoning immediately. It took quite a long time. It was a fairly contentious application. They started in 73 seeking out the approval to unify the zoning under the business classification. And they didn't receive it until May of 1975. There was an interesting sidelight. It was interesting to me. I won't take a long time, but there was an organization called the Suburban Action Institute, which objected to having these houses torn down. The fellow who had started and was the head of the Urban Action Institute was a fellow who, Krista, you may know him because he's fairly famous in the world of urban planning. His name's Paul Davidoff. And every year at your convention, they give a big prize, they give the Davidoff prize out. Well, he had started the Suburban Action Institute, and they basically went around trying to have an impact on the development or the dissolution of affordable housing. Well, the interesting thing about it is that Paul Davidoff started his planning career as the planner for New Canaan.
Mhm.
The local developers, as they dealt with this protracted process, the local developers leased the land as it was cleared, because they didn't clear all the property at the same time. But as they took a building down that would be leased to the town, and the town started developing it into a parking lot. In 1977, the town negotiated to purchase the lot from Mr. Mitchell. No price stated, but there was a referendum which overturned that agreement between the town and Mr. Mitchell. In 1978, the town again came to agreement with Mr. Mitchell, this time to lease the lot outright. Again, the electorate called for a referendum. This time, though, they called for the sustainment of the movement that the town had put in place. And in fact, there was a lease agreed on. Interestingly, this was the first time when the entire property was turned into a parking lot, and it had 153 spaces, which is the same number of spaces that it has today.
That doesn't surprise me, that it hasn't changed. Very tiny.
This was this was a permit and metered basis lot. 125 of the spaces were given on permit. And 6 years later, in 1984, the town came to an agreement with Mr. Mitchell to purchase the lot for $1.3 million. The interesting thing from my perspective was, even in 1984, when the advertiser commented on the lot being purchased by the town, they noted that it was well configured to permit an unobtrusive addition of a second deck when and if the need arose. So then we fast forward to the period of 2014, 2016. Many of us are probably aware of it, when the renovations and additions to this building displaced a lot of people who were parking behind this building, almost all of whom were town employees. The Board of Selectmen proposed that the town put a second deck onto the Locust Street lot, Locust Avenue lot, I'm sorry. And of course, they were going to take advantage of that natural grade difference. Many of you probably remember, they were proposing to put a ramp across from Heritage Hill to the top deck of the second deck of the new lot. It was interesting, and thank you very much, Hillary. I hadn't seen it, but Hillary showed it to me, or gave it to me today. There was actually a study of just that kind of work, a traffic study of just that kind of a prospect done in 2012. Notwithstanding that, the Board of Selectmen commissioned a second study in 15 or 14, I think, and both studies, actually using almost exactly the same language, said that providing an entrance and exit from Heritage Hill lot, assuming that the top deck would be used for town employee primarily for town employee parking, that it wouldn't in any way affect the quality of life along Heritage Hill. The Board of Selectmen, obviously assisted by the Department of Public Works, commissioned preliminary drawings of the what they proposed to build. Many of you may remember this, some of you might not. The prospects for this were adding another deck, and the preliminary work, which it never went to construction drawings, but the preliminary work was it led everybody to believe that there'd be an additional 89 spaces added with the deck. That's approximately 55–60% more than the 153 that exist on the lot today. There appeared to be quite a bit of enthusiasm about doing this decking until it got to be time to pay for it. The estimates that I found were that they contemplated it costing $4.125 million. Of course, they never went to contract, so that it was just the estimates of the designers. of that 4.125 million, they were going to take $500,000 from the town's parking fund and apply that to this. And the town applied for a $2 million grant from the Connecticut Department of Transportation, which was rejected as an inappropriate use of funds. So where do we stand on the Locust Avenue lot today? As I mentioned, it contains 153 spaces. It is over permitted. It is used primarily for free parking for the employees of retail and services throughout town. They permit more than 200 permits. I mean, just like they always do, they over permit, which, you know, I think we all agree with. There are 25 additional spaces set aside for town employees. And then finally, the balance of the spaces are all used for metered parking. I have a couple notes here.
Plus there's that spot in the back corner, right, where the fire department sometimes does drills in there, or like, I don't know if they,
Where is that?
doesn't the fire department use the back of that lot? There's like a
No,
somewhat space there, but anyway.
As I researched this, one of the features that was both rumored and applauded was taking control of the two parcels which are immediately north of the relatively new townhouses on Forest Street, and putting another form of egress out to the street there. Candidly, both of the traffic studies, which I read not in detail, but read cursorily, were very blasé about causing any additional traffic on Locust or on Heritage Hill, which are the two sources, the two places you would be accessed. What I learned was this property, unlike some of the properties, it's been a focus of development for years and years. And except for some slight pushback, or some, I guess it was credible pushback from Heritage Hill about the access way, there hasn't been a lot of pushback, either in the press or formal pushback in the courts.
Can you show the pictures? Again, I just want to see where that exit would be on Heritage Hill, because there is now the new apartments being built right there on Houston.
Yeah, let me see if I can.
I don't know if that changes anything from 2015.
It actually doesn't.
Okay.
I have a picture. I actually went up and took a photograph of there's probably about 60 feet between where they were proposing to put the ramp and that new, that small apartment building thing that they're building. There's a considerable degree of.
Okay, so there's still space.
Yeah.
So were you the one that had the concerns about the parking or the traffic coming out of it? Somebody on this, or wasn't you? Okay, maybe it was.
I mentioned at one of the earlier meetings that, if we were to add more traffic, that area is already congested, as we all know. I'm not saying it's not a good site for what we're trying to do, but I think one of the things you really have to do is understand what it does to the ability of the fire department to get their vehicles in and out in an emergency situation.
Without a doubt.
Because it's a lot of traffic stopping at that light right now. We just have to look at it.
Yeah.
Nice.
I'll refer to the library again. That presentation had that really interesting discussion about the traffic light that's in the middle of the street. What's it called?
Forest and Main?
Yes.
Yeah.
So if that light went away, if that became a stop sign instead, I think you would eliminate a lot of the issue with, it's really the left turn traffic that is always the problem. And
Yeah.
if that light was, it really would. I was like, oh, that's a clever idea. It is, but you have to narrow the road as well.
Mhm.
So you would have to change the way it's configured right now.
Are you talking about the light where you have to stop before you would turn to go on the Forest? And
Yeah, because
that light that's up, yeah. Oh, that's a terrible intersection.
But that is, yeah, but that is a bad, because it's just too wide. And you just, you live here, you don't think about it, but he was right. It's
Yeah, I
100%
think you're
right.
right.
It's just dangerous because it's so wide. So if it wasn't as wide and that didn't have a light there and you could prevent that traffic from getting backed up, then it wouldn't create as much of an impact on everybody coming on Locust.
So Krista, if I could just answer all the questions you asked.
Yeah.
So it's 1.2 to 1.3 acres. I found different numbers in different locations. 153 spaces, permitted to 200, 25 are allocated to town employees, and the balance are used on a metered basis. It's obviously it's Locust to the south, Heritage Hill to the west, and Forest to the east. Water and sewer is existing. No floodplain issues, no wetlands issues. I mean, there are no mentions of wetlands around that area. No apparent zoning or deed restrictions. The town has owned it outright since 1978. And it has a favorable grade. It's about, my guess, just walking myself, it's about 30 feet at Heritage Hill. And it's still about 5 feet when you're on the edge of the parking lot on the Forest Street side. It's a slope down from the edge of the parking lot to the Forest Street. And it's, some people say it's an ideal site. I don't think it's an ideal site because it's a long way to the railroad, to the station, and there's no major food outlet within easy walking distance. So it's not that that would knock it out, but just being candid about it, it's not as perfect as it might seem.
Other questions on Locust?
No, that was really interesting.
Yeah, the
Did you get that
history
from the
is
Historical
fascinating.
Society?
Pardon me?
Did you get that from the Historical Society?
Yeah, they were really helpful. And then Tiger was helpful on some things. And then I did a lot of work on my own, just on some of the sources that you had given us.
Yeah.
And again, I apologize for not using your format.
Okay, you got
You
it.
can see I was pretty,
That's okay. I want to help you not have to share your screen anymore.
okay,
Stop. All right.
thank you.
And the only thing I'd add on that site, Jeff, just anecdotal, whatever it's worth, just another bullet. I remember when the post office was going in, I remember when the townhouses were being constructed. The town picks up a ton of drainage water up on top of the hill. And there's a major pipe that runs from the parking lot somewhere there, probably behind the post office. Kind of, I think in between the townhouses and somewhere in there, and gets back out to Forest. So I just mentioned.
Yeah,
that.
and Maria's mentioned it, Jane's mentioned it. When Jeff Speck did his walkabout and then presented that night, one of the things that really grabbed me was that he really is averse to building parking below. He said both, a lot of people don't like to park their car below grade. And secondly, it's more expensive to park it below grade. And so my assumption was anything we would do on this particular lot would be at grade. And so we may have to work around pipes and all that kind of thing with foundations and all that type of thing. But I didn't see taking it down. You know, that was the problem that I understood the library had, is when they started putting a full basement in, they ran into some existing sewers that were draining a considerable part of downtown. But that's a good catch.
Well, their biggest problem is traffic.
You mean with the garage under the library?
Yeah, they ultimately had two traffic architects and something. Basically said the level of service.
This is the library, or?
Yeah, because they were gonna park beneath, like, that's why they were gonna do the basement, was to have underground parking under the library.
Also, your point there also. School, they realize it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah. Cost engineered.
So this, you know, this would seem to me to be a high priority.
Okay. All right, so the last one is Mr. Sweeney, and Bob has your presentation, right?
That's fine.
And you did the little sliver at Pine Park?
Yes.
Well, that's coming up. Who owns that building that has decked parking with the FedEx drop box on Locust? Do you guys know what I'm talking about? It's like, there's an underground part and then decked. And then is it offices? But I feel like I never see.
Oh, the Merrill Lynch, the one that used to be Mrs. Green's?
No,
where
on
Best
Locust.
Worst
You
is
mean
the
below
UPS store.
Forest?
Yes.
Yeah, I know what you're talking
You know
about.
what I'm talking about?
Across
I
from where,
wonder if
across
it's
from
owned.
where
I
the,
mean,
I don't know who owns, I mean, I
I
could look
wonder
it
who
up.
owns that. It might be cheaper to try and buy a building than build decked parking.
There's a lot of businesses in there.
Yeah, are there?
Mhm.
Oh, I know office space
Individual
here is such
offices.
a okay, that makes sense.
Oh, you mean the brick building, like across from
Yeah.
Walgreens?
No,
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 I'm like all over. I don't know.
across from like where the new police station
where the
is
temporary police station is, it's across the
Next.
street,
on Locust Avenue.
across Locust Avenue.
I turn around there all the time to park right now.
Oh, okay, got it.
Because there's like a
In the
little
office
ingress
building.
where you can
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
sneak. But I always wondered about that. I use that FedEx Dropbox a lot. Anyway.
All right.
So there were two pieces that were identified. One's the state of Connecticut piece, which is the upper parcel along the railroad tracks. And then a lower piece, which is owned by the town. On the state of Connecticut piece, what we're looking at is the piece that's just south of the railroad tracks, but it's all part of the whole. So it would have to be subdivided away from the state of Connecticut piece. So the state of Connecticut parcel also includes the train station on the other side and part of the parking. So the larger piece is 2.7 acres. Just probably eyeballing it, the state of Connecticut piece that's on the south side is maybe about 0.4 of an acre, something in that ballpark. That's just a bit of a guess playing with geometry on a map. The town of Canaan piece is about 0.2 of an acre. It's in the business A zone, which is public material, since whatever happens anywhere in town will be a function of zoning regardless. Obviously, the location is ideal for walking and location to everything. When I first saw these two properties together, I kind of passed on them, but it was Marie or someone mentioned it, and I became a little more, sanguine about it as I looked at it. It's kind of interesting to tuck something in there. The town of New Canaan piece has, let's see, about 15 parking spaces. If I kind of really, on the state of Connecticut piece, there's about 55 spaces. So that would have to be contended with. There is a slope. When you get down to the, I guess it would be the westerly side of the property, looking up the state of Connecticut piece, which wraps around. Bob, can you flip a couple pages? I think I had a sketch in there if I did it right.
There's only one other page, this one.
Oh, okay, I guess I didn't get it in there.
This is your second page.
Okay, and what was the first page?
Go back up to the first page. That's the first page.
Okay,
You want the second page?
please. Okay, that's kind of the Canaan piece. So I didn't get a sketch in there, so sorry about that. Altogether, it'd be maybe about 0.6 acres. Slope drops fairly significantly as one goes along Pine Street. Just standing out there, it looks like it's about, 1 story, about up the top of your head, a little bit more than that. So there are opportunities there with the slope of the property. I mean, the main obstacle is the state of Connecticut piece. I just know from experience that dealing with the state of Connecticut, although usually for private property owners, it's like pulling teeth. It's a year's process to do the most simple thing that ought to be approved or thought about in about 2 days. Obviously, with something like this, with a ton of New Canaan behind it and some political oomph, and some accommodation made for the lost parking, Department of Transportation, the DOT, they kind of act as their own little fiefdom. So politics is a big play on this property. See whether it could happen or not, but it would also have to be a subdivision because the southerly piece of the larger lot would have to be cut away from the train station. I took a quick look at title. There's a ton of easements. There's a lot of radioactivity left over from when Penn Central owned it before DOT got it, before it became Metro North. So there's a lot of
Penn Central.
there's a lot of cleanup to do on that, but I didn't see any restrictive covenants on the property. neither did I see that on the town of the Canaan property. The town of Canaan parcel was only acquired in 1986. It's fairly recent. It was bought from a private property owner. If there's anything else I can add. Sewer, water, no flood zone. I flipped on the walkscore.com and rates very highly. Because it's right near the middle of anything, of everything. The only question mark I had is what the thinking is in the community and among us as to, location. Is placing something like this, right in a pretty prominent spot, is that a worthwhile thing? Is that what we should be doing? Or are we looking more around the circumference of the area that we're looking at? I don't know the answer to that. But it would lend itself to, a more of a targeted application, which I think is what we've been talking about, at least for the next moratorium.
And mixed use too. It's a really good opportunity for mixed use there.
Mike, what are the state of Connecticut spaces used for the Metro North folks?
It appears to be, yeah. I didn't research with the state of Connecticut to find out, but I'm assuming it's commuter parking that's there.
It's commuter parking, but it's interesting. I went in there a couple months ago, about 50% of the cars were in New York State. So you've got people coming down from Vista or Pound Ridge, parking in there. So it's probably even less than 50% that are Connecticut.
It's huge, New York State.
Yeah. So I mean, you could consider swapping out to go to Talmadge Hill if that's under capacity too, to give the state some of that. And there is a precedent that Westport had gotten some land not long ago. I think Tony Wong did that for Westport a couple of years ago, where they did a small development and they used state land, state-owned property for
You know
that.
how long that took?
It took a while, but I think now that there's more of a priority for this and there's legislation around it, so I think that they're looking at it.
And was that for affordable housing or
Mhm.
was that for private?
Mhm.
That was for affordable.
That piece of land is kind of an optical illusion, right? Because it looks so skinny, like I almost,
Mhm.
in my mind's eye, I'm thinking of like a Flatiron building that would go
Yeah.
there, something like that. But I think it is an optical, I think it's just the sort of dramatic slope of it and, yeah.
All the years I lived in town, I don't think I ever drove up to that upper level all the way to the back. It's another world. up there, yeah.
Significant.
But I think the state of Connecticut thing is the thing that jumps out at me. I know that I've represented private property owners. I also represented one time the town of Darien when they were doing this type of pretty benign request for fallow property, all full of weeds, full of broken glass. And there's a whole process that the state goes through. And sometimes the attorney general will get involved, but they really have to protect the interests of the citizens of the state to make sure that they really don't need this property and never would need it again in the future, because last thing they want to do is come back and take it by eminent domain. So it takes a while, but of course, in this one, we have the town of Canaan, behind it to request and push for it, as well as our representatives if it came to pass.
Interesting.
I think that's all I had.
Like, is the whole address 198 Park? It's on the street. For me, 198 Park Street, sorry, excuse me, I think you meant to say 198 Elm Street. Yes, Park Street is just to the south of the view. So the whole address is 198. It's 198.
Okay, so that's all of our presentations. I'm just gonna go back to the slide that has the list.
The 13 spaces, is that the spaces that are open to the public to park in? That's the Canaan part, that little square.
Yeah,
where
there's two or
it's
three on the
going
left as you drive in, and
Yeah.
then it wraps around on the.
The right.
Yeah.
You got the
each floor
mailboxes.
side.
Yeah.
Where the
I
mailbox.
park there a lot.
Another one for mailboxes, I would say.
It's a really handy place to park because it's
Yeah.
free and close to the north end of them or west end of them. I don't know what direction.
It sits down too, a little bit, so that you wouldn't have a loom factor because of the parking lot, and because of the train tracks next door. The topography gets pretty high up on Elm Street, on the other side, going up to 220 Elm and going toward Walter Stewart's and toward Carl Chevrolet. So wouldn't be sticking out of the ground, I don't think. That's just my perception.
And you also have the railroad there, so it makes it that much easier too.
Stuff's right there. Yeah.
So which did we not do?
So the only one I think we didn't do is number 5, which was the Playhouse, Park Street, the one basically where we just parked this evening. So I guess the question to the group is, it's number 1, it's 6:45, so we probably aren't going to get into small ball tonight. So let's talk about where we want to go next with these properties. I mean, I think we have a good start. Do we want to narrow this list down tonight based on what we heard and focus on just a couple? Do we want to continue to, I mean, I noted on some of these, we still have some more research to do on some things. So do we want to continue our research? What are your thoughts on and how we keep this moving?
Well, there are a couple where there are obstacles that we could pretty quickly figure out whether they're going to take a huge amount of time or not, a huge amount of time, like the mulch pile,
Right.
waive any restrictions, the town, Upton Lloyd family, and also the issue with the state. I'm not sure which other ones, but it may be.
I've kind of two minds on it that, I think the logical approach would be to try to narrow it down in the sweet spot that we think of the 2 or 3 or something like that. Or 2. The other thing I'm concerned about is that at some point, we're going to get consultants on to really look at it, and
Right.
Yeah,
real developers look at this, and I'd be afraid that we might miss something, that
Right.
we might be dismissive of a property that developers look at and say, no, you got it completely wrong. Here's what we can do here. We have an epiphany and we pass on something.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think we're starting to get to the place where we're going to need some consulting help
Yeah.
in terms of developers or architects to kind of look at these sites with us and say, like you said, this one's a real loser, no potential, or this one you thought was a loser actually has a lot of potential. So I think that's one piece that, we'll need to talk about.
and some legal help.
Legal help,
Some-
yeah.
Does
on
it
sort
need
of
to
the
waive
deed
anyone
restrictions.
probably?
The other thought I had was if we are still headed towards any sort of public meeting in the fall, I don't know that we want it. 7 may be too many, but 2 may be too little. I mean, I do think to your point earlier, Jane, we want people to feel like there's options. And so to be able to say, whatever, there's 3, there's 5, maybe there's 7 options. And here's the pros and cons of each option. And we've now by this point, hopefully looked at them with a real estate developer and maybe an attorney to really assess whether, what the pros and cons are. That puts some control in the hands of the public to help make an informed decision about which option's good.
Krista, it's Bill. I'm not sure, maybe it's me, but I'm not sure that I understand what criteria was sort of looking at these 7 against. Is it speed of action? Is it density? Is it, is it cost? What are the 5 or 7 or 10 criteria we're looking at these against? And for me, that might be helpful.
Okay, I think that's a fair point, and it wasn't something I'd considered. But I think everything you just said sounds right.
And since we have both small ball and big ball mixed here, could separate them.
Yeah. I mean, maybe we could spend some time between now, and the next meeting, depending on when you feel you want to get this done by, sort of, trying to outline what the criteria are. And then, for example, so as an example, if you were to say criteria was, what's the biggest place where we could accommodate the most people, multi-purpose, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, then of course, the mulch pile would come to the top because, in a grand design, it might be as many as 20 acres. If that's not the highest criteria, then that might make the mulch pile fall to the bottom. And I'm not trying to lobby for the mulch pile. I'm just using that as an example. I mean, the one thing it does seem to me that when you take a look at the 6 sites we looked at excluding the mulch pile, is they're all in town. And there are pluses and minuses to that. The plus is it's in town, it's walking, grocery, train, etc. The minus is that it's in town and it's creates more volume in town. And I don't know where in people's minds, that sorts in or sorts out.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main reason they largely ended up in town is because that's where we own land and that's where the sewer district is. I do like having the mulch pile on there as an option because it's a very different option to me. I mean, Morse Court, Richmond Hill, Locust, while they're different, they're similar, right? Like kind of just choose one and you can do something. But the mulch pile is a different option. And I think, again, when we go out to the public, if they like, for whatever reason, hey, we hate this idea in town, well, then it's like, okay, well, there's this other piece that's not in town, has its own challenges, but.
I think if we can get to a point where we narrow it maybe to 4, have a consultant come in and tell us if that's even feasible, and then we have like 2 or 3 alternates that maybe we could sub in. And then I do think there is a point at which we have a consultant come, give us like a ballpark estimate of cost for what we want to do, because this has to be paid for. And then I really like the idea of doing like a community focus group where they do the
dots.
stickers or whatever about which, I think that's very telling. And I don't know that it would behoove us to narrow it, like present one option.
Right.
I think that, I mean, for me, just after this, the Morse Court parking lot just shot up in my list because and I'm not advocating this at all. So anybody listening, please don't. I just read an article about how they build affordable housing, deeply affordable housing on top of a library in New York City. And the library provides a lot of children's programs for the kids that are there. I'm just thinking about across the street from our library. Like here you have a free community center essentially for families that would be living in affordable housing. It has,
There's green space there.
there's
yeah.
green space right there. It's also walkable to town and there's like Keen's Market. And then you can also walk to the grocery stores and it's close to Mead Park. So that just, in thinking about it and hearing this presentation, that sort of, and it is sort of that like flat eyesore in the middle of.
Yeah.
That's.
It's like the jack-o'-lantern teeth, it's the missing tooth.
It's limited capacity. I mean, that's a small ball. Yeah, right.
I mean,
Well, not too small.
So I mean, in
like
terms of the
middle ball.
criteria that Bill was talking about, I mean, part of that gets decided on how many units we need and part of, that gets decided based on the moratorium and based on the lawsuits and based on all the other things that we've continued to talk about.
Yeah.
So, I mean, at this moment in time, I think we're looking at like, yeah, if we could build 10 units, we'd probably be in a really good position.
Right.
But that could change in a month.
Yeah.
We could be back here saying, nope, we need 40, every meeting's a new adventure.
I'm interested in the issue that both Mike and Bill brought up about how do we prioritize, how do we look at properties on the periphery, looking at the mulch pile versus in town and the positives and negatives. I've kind of been convinced by what you hear affordable housing experts say about better places for people to live, et cetera, but that's anecdotal. And I do think it would be interesting when we do the session with the town to present both cases and keep our minds open to that, because it doesn't feel as if we really know. I mean, we might be able to figure out what's best for the town at this moment. And how do we balance that with what's best for the people living in the housing? I don't feel qualified to make that assessment.
Can I say something real quick? I apologize,
Yeah.
I'm gonna go set up. but
Yeah.
Just one swing vote for all of you tonight's speakers, one of them is Steve Levin.
Great.
Steve knows where he proposed a lot of ideas, he's creative, I don't know how vocal he's going to be willing to do, but for each of you who looked at these projects, feel free to push Steve on some of these things.
Okay.
He's a creative guy.
Yeah. And he'll know some of,
Yeah.
he'll be familiar with the history that we've all just learned tonight.
He did, whoever's got the railroad, he did a lot of work.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
he did a lot of work.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, so we need to wrap up. First, let's talk about a next meeting date and then we'll talk about what we want to accomplish. So So this time we did it before the full committee meeting. Is that something that you guys like, or do you prefer to have it on a separate night? The next full committee meeting is August 12th. And I'll just warn you, if you choose August 12th, which is totally fine, someone else is going to be leading the meeting because I'll be on Zoom. So think about that before you make your choice.
Wait, does that mean you'd be on vacation? We don't want to do this while you're on vacation, so that's not fair to you.
Well, I could just be on Zoom,
Well, or we could do it the next week.
or we could do it the next week. So the week of the 19th, I will be back because it's football preseason and summer is over. So if you guys want to push it to the end of August, then I can be here in person.
The 19th being the end.
Well, yeah, that week for me is, that week for me is the end of summer.
It looks good.
That's fine with me.
But if I'm not, I can zoom in.
Okay,
No,
I
we
may
can.
be away that week. I just don't know yet, but
okay.
I'll hold it up for me.
Was the following week of the 26th better for anyone? Because,
No.
I'm trying to figure out my August one now, so.
Okay.
Don't go by me.
All right.
All
so sounds like maybe the week of August 19th is the day, August 19th open. All right, let's just say August 19th at what time? 7, 6?
If we're just gonna do our own, why
We're
don't we
just
do it
doing
at
our own.
6? Why don't we
Six.
just do it at 6?
Okay.
Yeah.
6 PM. All right, so I think what I would say in terms of where we go from here, for any of you that presented and had questions that, you couldn't answer at this moment, or had work that you wanted to get to and you didn't, I'll put myself in that bucket. I think let's go back and, do a little more digging and refine and have some conversations. I think if you have thoughts on criteria, in terms of how we start to prioritize these, send them to me and I'll try and put together something on that for our next meeting.
I have a good spreadsheet that Rita Bettino actually created for us to analyze capital projects for budgets. And it's where you assign like a rank, you can put in a bunch of different criteria and you assign like a 1 through 5 ranking, where 5 is like critically important and 1 would be not. So there might be something that I'm more sensitive to, or that I'm thinking of, we don't necessarily have to agree like this is the priority, but I think if we merge those rankings together, it could be very helpful. Everybody could do their own ranking. I can point blank, I'll send around the spreadsheet.
Okay.
We can figure out if that's something, a
And
tool we
like-
want to use.
Like on green space, when the housing authority did Millport, we dense packed as many units as we
No,
could.
it's really,
We shorted parking. There's one little crucible like for a swing set, but kids are playing out in parking, it's wasn't ideal. I think we maybe rationalized, we had a little bit of space across the street and maybe people could walk, there was a park up on Summer Street, I think, and
Yeah.
I think we rationalized it, but I think we did a better job on Canaan Parish.
Yeah.
And now we're having both properties be able to use the facilities there. I think that was a better attempt at trying to put some green space in, but again, if we're looking at some of these, properties that we talked about, green space, might be limited. Maybe that's okay, because you walk to Mead Park.
Okay, so we'll send me emails on criteria. We'll refine anything on your slides. I know John is aware that we're gonna need consulting help, so that's a conversation I'll continue to have. I can't promise I'll have a person on board before the next meeting, but hopefully, we'll be starting to get close to narrowing it down to a group or somebody to help us. And then I guess I'll also put on the agenda for the next meeting, the stuff I prepared for small ball tonight, although Jane, are we talking about that in the larger meeting tonight?
When we get to future speakers, we'll talk a little bit about it, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll make sure to talk about that
all
particular.
right, small ball
Issue.
for next meeting. Okay,
Do you know who would know in town most about Jeff Speck? I'd love to talk to him about what he thought about Horse Court. It might have been just a passing thought, or he might have spent a lot of time thinking about it, but I'd like to talk.
so I know that whole talk was arranged by kind of a coalition of people, but led by the library, and I can give you the name of the person that I think arranged
great.
it at the library.
Ellen might be a good
Ellen,
bravado, or,
I was gonna say
The
Nikki
development
Florida.
person.
yeah, she, Ellen might be a good contact at the library, and if Planet New Canaan did it with them, then Robin Bates Mason or Kate Ousley would be.
Okay, I'll try to find out. And I know they spent the day, he spent the day with town, was he with Tiger all day? Who was he
He
with?
was with.
He was with Leo for
Yeah.
2/3 of the day.
Okay, I'll ask Leo too.
Okay.
And you know who else might know that? I think Chris Chipper was involved in
Yes.
arranging all that.
Yeah,
stuff.
like I said, there was a whole coalition that kind of arranged. to bring
Chris
him in.
Chipper.
Shipper.
Yeah.
Head of the conservation. Commission?
Usually interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
No, I think he's kind of off all that stuff now.
All right,
great, thank you.
before we go, can we get an approval of the June 3rd minutes? So I can.
For
All right,
Second.
Jane, all in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
Okay, all in favor of adjournment?
hi.
Hi.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Krista. Thank you, Bob.
No, I think left.
Probably in the other room.
Jeff, the person that you mentioned who was the first sort of big affordable housing person or planning and zoning person here. what-
David